here, I'm gonna stop recording this. I'm just announcing that, you know, I'm not sure if the people who've already been let in or are doing that or whatever, but, okay, sorry, I'm just admitting everybody.
I concur with you, and you have my full support on that.
Okay, thank you. I think we should just all be present as like human beings. I don't need to have AI in my meeting. So I have an awful lot to announce here today. Hi, everybody, and I just wanted to get started. I see some new faces. I'm super psyched about this. I have so much to talk about, so here we go. A lot of developments. So the first thing is that I am recording this meeting. If you can't be on a recorded line, of course, there's always the option to just join and watch the replay. And if you require closed captioning, there's the option at the bottom. You can see where the arrow is pointing just to the bottom of the screen. So the other thing is that if anybody requires accommodations due to disability, perhaps if someone is hard of hearing or vision or requires language translation to another language, please, it's always better to let me know in advance, but if you weren't able to, let me know after the replay, after the meetup, and I'll try to be as accommodating as I can. We don't use like flash photography or anything in these meetups for that reason. I have an autistic child, and so I'm a little sensitive to all these things. Now, so Wednesday at 1 p.m. every week is our pod day. This is when we kind of collaborate on each other's posts and comment jointly to increase reach and performance on social media, to get the word out about the good word of transparency. Woo! Yes. Now, there is an opportunity for somebody who's at a broker-dealer, an advisor who needs to kind of be rescued. They're doing kind of like scummy broker dealer stuff. And I was like, you know, you should come to my group and like meet these flat fee advisors. And so he definitely is down with transparency and wants to come over to the good side. So if anybody wants to mentor, you know, to maybe just give him a little bit of help in his job or whatever, in his job search, that would be great. Let me know if you'd be willing to do that. Now, so I have a very dear friend of mine, Erica. Erica, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes, I'm just eating lunch.
Okay, so
Hi.
Eric Simonson is here, and Eric is someone that I'm very proud of. I'm very proud to stand behind him because what he's done is I triumph the accomplishments of our group in so many ways, and there are so many of you that I would be equally as proud of for your dignified accomplishments. But one of the things that I really love about Eric's doing is he's founded Abundo Wealth, and it's bringing financial planning at, in many cases, a much lower price point. And, you know, he's served hundreds and hundreds of people already. This is catching on like wildfire. It's an advice-only planning firm, bringing planning to the world. Woo! So excited. So he's going to be talking at our May meetup. Eric's here today as well. You should all connect with Eric and definitely follow him, give him a shout out on social media, etc. So that's the May meetup. So by the way, everybody, if you want to sign up for that, I'm going to put it into the chat as soon as I can find the chat. There we go. Okay. Good. So that's our May meetup. Today, we're going to be talking about a variety of things, but first I just have some quick announcements. I'm sorry for all the announcements today, but there are some really important things going on. So after Immersion 2024, which was in March in St. Louis, we're having Immersion 2025 in March in Kansas City, by the way, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But it just became obvious to me that we need more of a voice to connect with consumers. And here's the reason. Over the last month, I am constantly hearing from high net worth people about the travails and the turmoil that they've had working with broker dealers, even some AUM advisors. But there was one particularly heartbreaking case in which somebody was given some very bad financial planning advice and is now house poor, having to have a tenant in her home because somebody just gave financial planning advice that they were not qualified to give. And this breaks my heart. I love my country, and I don't want to let my country down. I don't want to let anybody be treated this way by our industry because it dually malfunctions. It makes our qualified professionals look bad, and it prevents people from living in the way that they really should be and receiving the proper advice. And I just am taking a little bit more action because of these stories. They've prompted me to do that, in addition to the fact that we just had immersion. And I think meeting everybody in person kind of solidified the fact that I need to go out into the world and create demand from the consumer. And so that's what I'm doing. So I was actually contacted over social media by a HR person at a very large Fortune 500 company. I'm probably going to be speaking there about how to find a financial advisor. So this would have the opportunity, I always refer into this group. Of course, I never am compensated for any of this, but I do like to kind of steer people your way, also to qualified fee-only AUM advisors that operate in a very pure basis if there's no flat fee or planning available, if it's more suitable to work with AUM, right? But I just want to publicly state my intentions that I do see something wrong in the world. And I think the fact I'm not a financial advisor makes people slightly more inclined to see me as objective. I don't think anybody's really truly objective. I would be false to say that. But what I will say is that the fact that I'm not a financial advisor going out there, that I am definitely a spokesperson for some of you, but that I think they see it as a little bit more objective, right? So I will be excited if I'm, by God's grace, selected to be worthy of the opportunity to speak to this Fortune 500 company and all of their employees. And I do intend, it is my intention to pursue other opportunities to speak this way and to reach others. I'm trying to do various things over social media. I've attempted to reach out to the CPA community. CPA community is not really having it, but there are different ways, and I know if I'm just persistent, I know that I can get out to them and get a little bit better message than we have had so far to them about like flat fee, advice planning, et cetera, right? The other thing is I have started to write an ebook called How to Find a Financial Advisor Who Won't Ruin Your Life. And the reason is that I've heard from so many high net worth people. I mean, we're talking about people with millions and millions of dollars that have come to me and said, I am just perplexed in my search. I have no idea how to even approach this. And like, I can't charge them a consulting fee. I can't work with everybody in a consultant capacity because then I'd actually have to register as a registered investment advisor. Yes, I know. Stultifying that the regulars have their hooks in everything, right? Just by me saying like, here are the criteria you should work. If I work with them on a one-on-one basis and I'm compensated for my time, I have to register as a registered investment advisor. Not doing that, right? No offense to anybody. It's a wonderful job, but not for me, right? And I don't want that requirement on me, right? So, but I am writing an ebook and I'm going to be doing a publicity campaign and an outreach on that. And I think that that'll shuttle even more attention towards our mission and what we're doing. So I just want to announce all of these things because I think it's important that all of you know that I'm out there pursuing this mission. And of course, it is for the benefit of the transparency that we are all striving for. And if anyone, has questions about that or wants to support what I'm doing or wants to talk with me or has ideas, I would welcome them. But I'm out there fighting for you. But most of all, I'm fighting for the people. I'm fighting for the Americans that need to hear from us and need to hear this message. I know, and it's hard for me, I have like a husband, 4 kids, a business, clients I need to take care of. It's hard for me, but I'm committed to the fight. It's going to be hard, but I am out here fighting. And so far it looks like I'm gaining a little bit of traction. Thanks be to God. Another thing would be, I have this survey here. I just wanted to get everybody's feedback and I'm going to put the survey into the chat. I want to know what I need to do as to the strategic direction of this group. I do have a few ideas after Immersion 2024. I mean, I know that a lot of you are working with XYPN, and maybe Garrett planning as well. I know that we have people from Garrett here, which I'm very grateful and humbled for. Is there a need for flat fee specific like platform or advice only specific platform in terms of like insurances or technology or whatever? Let me know if you have ideas about this, if it would be easier. One of the things that I've heard predominantly from this group is the challenge of selling a practice or finding a successor. So that is one of the things I'm thinking about finding a solution for. I think the biggest way I can help right now is just connecting people. So if anybody is looking to find a successor or sell their practice, please just be in touch with me and I can maybe figure out some ideas about who you should talk to within our group. There are hundreds and hundreds of advisors on my list. Not everybody came to the immersion or comes to these virtual meetups, but I have a very large directory of people that are operating on a flat fee or advice only or hourly basis. And I want to help you. If you're trying to sell your practice, let me know and we can talk about it. Immersion 2024 is the subject of this meetup today. It was in St. Louis. The next immersion, sorry, I'm like dropping so much into the chat here. I feel like I'm talking like way more than I should be talking, but I just have so much to discuss. There's so much activity here strategically that I apologize. I really do. This is not about me or my intentions, but I do have a lot here that I'm trying to work on, okay? Immersion 2025 is going to be in Kansas City on March 11th to the 13th of 2025. I actually went ahead and I already booked the hotel and I situated it in the middle of the country. I thought it would be fair that way to the people on the East and the West Coast equally. I know nothing is ever equal, but as equal as it could be. And I'm going to move forward with starting to sell tickets probably in June. I know I said July, but I'm right now in negotiations with vendors. It looks like the ticket price is probably going to be the same. It's going to be probably about $250 a ticket. And so that's in progress. Now, this was Immersion 2024. I can't even believe it was about a month ago and I like miss people already. But anyways, there were so many key points about that we said during the immersion, and I know I have a lot of people here who were there. So and thank you all for being here. I'm so humbled that you've taken the time. And I would ask the immersion attendees to perhaps like jump in because I know I won't be able to relay the key talking points, but there were so many good things that came about as a result of this meetup, and I want to share them with all of you that are on this call. So one of the first things was, actually, before we jump into that, is there anything anybody wants to say? I've just been blabbing on. And again, I'm so sorry for talking so much. I'm going to shut up now. Does anybody want to talk on anything I just said?
I'll just say I'm looking forward to 2025 and thanks for doing what you do.
And thank you, Sarah, for doing a good job for 2024. And like Mike said, looking forward to 2025.
And I think ditto's over here
Yeah,
too. We had
definitely.
a wonderful time meeting everybody. Just having a room full of people who are very like-minded was really cool.
It's
So
cool.
I'm
You
looking
don't
forward to it.
you don't have to explain yourself, you know? I mean, when you're in a room full of like-minded people, it's like, we all get it.
Okay. So one of the first points that I want to relate to the group that was made during immersion was this challenge of how do I, if I'm not debiting my fee out of the account directly, how do I present the case of that being okay? And this is something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And during immersion, we had somebody, I don't know, Kelly, are you here? Kelly?
I am.
Oh, okay. Sorry, there were two Kellys. Hi, Kelly. Good to see you.
Which Kelly? The
Kelly
other Kelly?
Nielsen. Well, there was another Kelly there, and Kelly Nielsen just was kind of like, this is total head trash. You have to just really envision the value proposition for yourself. And I was actually like, kind of like, wow, like maybe I myself even have gotten caught up in like believing this idea of, I mean, so just to be clear, right? When an AUM fee is debited out of a custodian, the client doesn't have to write a check, but they have to write a check for like the $5,000 or whatever a plan costs. So everybody, what do you want to talk about this point? Like Kelly was saying it's just head trash and you should just absolutely not have any subconscious issues with it yourself, and then they won't. So what do you all think? Does anybody have any insights here?
Sarah, I think there's some nuance depending on the nature of the account. To the extent it's a qualified plan account like a 401k or an IRA, you absolutely have different legal obligations, because if you're providing investment advice for a fee and charging that account, one, you're a fiduciary, not just as an RIA, assuming you're a registered investment advisor, but under ERISA, which has different implications. And your ability to charge that plan will necessarily be dictated on whether or not the fiduciaries that are responsible will even permit that. So, and given the fact, I sent you a direct message, this fact, apart from somebody's personal residence, their largest asset oftentimes is these retirement accounts. It's incumbent upon all advisors to understand that nuance.
So what's the key point of what you just said?
Well, I mean, let's say you've got a client. You're assuming your client is John Smith. technically an IRA is not John Smith. He's the beneficial owner. Same thing with a 401k account. Now, the IRA is much easier because there's not really anybody else involved necessarily. But if you've got John Smith and he's got $500,000 sitting in his 401k plan and you're advising him or his family on their aggregate portfolio, which is assets in the 401k plan, assets in IRAs, assets sitting in, after-tax brokerage accounts, what have you, as total structure. To the extent you're going to bill, the question is whether it's AUM or flat dollar, are you taking into account the amounts in the 401k? What are you doing with the 401k? Are you charging him somewhere else? That distinction and nuance needs to be understood because you may not be able to charge, let's say your asset base, just to make things easy. You're charging 1% on his aggregate portfolio. You may not even be able to charge that directly to the 401k account because you may not be permitted. So you may have to charge, if his total portfolio is $1 million, half of which is in the 401k, you may have to charge 1% somewhere else, which means effectively 2% on the other $500,000. To the extent you can charge directly, all the better. And that goes to the transparency concept. But I think it's worth people understanding that because it's not intuitive, but ERISA is its own beast and it creates some special nuances.
Thank you, Heath. That was Heath Miller.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I'm a tax employee benefits attorney. I'm kind of the one oddball here, but I started Access Retirement Solutions, which is a 401k pooled employer plan platform. So I attend when I can. I'm actually in a coffee shop, which is why you're not looking at me, but
Okay.
I like to participate. So I'll
Okay.
shush.
All right. Thank you, Heath. Thank you. Chris, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so this idea of billing directly out of, checking accounts, whether it's monthly or quarterly, was a hill that I was willing to die on for a long time. And I've since softened my stance a bit for a couple of reasons. One was a post that Andy Panko did about billing out of IRAs and having some tax efficiency around that for the client. I don't want to quote what he said because I don't want to misquote him, but there can be a benefit to the client for paying their bill for financial services out of IRAs. And then I came across a new prospect who has signed on as a client, and he received an injury settlement, and he is out of work due to the injury. And so I believe he and I might work on billing out of his investment account, even though it's a flat fee, because he's not going to have income for a while. And so while we're working together, we're going to bill out of his investment account. So just a couple of scenarios that I've learned recently about alternative methods to billing. Carol,
yes.
Sarah, we've been billing this way since forever because my mom started as an hourly planner. I do think there's a sensitivity to it. There's no question, especially when you raise rates, which we do once a year. We finally ended up deciding to just do it once a year. We tell people it's coming. We tell them the quarter ahead about what the percentage increase will be for the bulk of everybody. And then if somebody's a special situation, like they call every day, they're going to get a different one. We have a separate conversation if they have a different increase. But it's not been a problem. Nobody's ever paid me from an IRA. Once somebody asked, I believe, and then talked to their CPA and didn't do it. But whether we've had conversations where we're holistic, so we're going to address everything. Doesn't mean we have to bill from every account. Here's our bill for the time and expertise that we spend with you. It's fixed fee, which is what we do now every quarter. It is different. People see it every quarter, right? Now, we used to bill, paper bills, and they had to write a check and send us a check. Once COVID hit, we went to advice pay. So it's a little bit easier in that, it's only once a year when they have to approve the increase that they really have to do anything. The other 3 quarters it comes out of whatever account they set up, we don't even see it. So that makes it a little bit easier, but it's important to us because it really is part of the education of what you're paying for your financial services.
When you pay everyone else by check too, you pay a lawyer, you pay a doctor, you have insurance for this, but at the end of the day, you write a check.
Yeah.
So it's no different, right?
And I would add to what Chris and Carol said, if you've got qualified plan assets, why you would pay an otherwise deductible expense through a non-deductible structure is almost contrary to the very thing you're trying to provide, which is financial advice. And furthermore, in a business setting, which many of your higher net worth individuals, if they're not W-2 employees, often have their own businesses. To the extent they end up setting up a 401k plan and don't have one, there are tax credits now even associated with the establishment of a plan for 3 years, depending on their head count, which means it's not only deductible because you're providing advice possibly on how to structure that plan, et cetera. It's subject to a tax credit, which may be as high as $5,000 or $5,500, depending on what they do a year for 3 years. So why you would ever do something through a non-deductible structure when you can use a deductible and potentially a full offset tax credit, making your services in essence free or fully subsidized or partially by the government, is beyond me.
Heath, can you say that again for me? I think I got lost somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I speak pretty quick. So the Secure Act, which came in and went live 2021, and Secure 2.0, which came in, I believe, last year, allows any business that has fewer than 100 employees. There's different tax credits now. One is for the establishment of a plan, and it's based on their workforce. So generally speaking, if they have folks that make under about 150 grand a year, they're non-highly comped. If they don't own a 5% interest, you get a $250 tax credit for non-highly, up to a total of $5,000 for the next 3 years. And if they do auto enrollment, which is now required for all new plans, basically, it's up to $5,500. So when you're providing advice to a small business owner on their overall portfolio, it's not uncommon for that person who trusts you with his or her assets to turn around and go, oh, by the way, I've got 30 employees. I was thinking about putting in a 401k plan, or I live in California or Illinois that now have state mandated IRA programs, which are a bigger pain in the neck than setting up a plan. And if I set up a plan, I get to avoid that mess, and there's tax credits. Why wouldn't I do that? This is a way to provide additional value to those individuals. And you may be able to provide advice on the setup of the plan and how that works literally free, because the cost of setting it up in many instances may be, could include some of these expenses and maybe less than the available tax credit. So, those are all things worth getting knowledgeable about, because I think it's a way to show additional value and get further, for lack of a better word, entrenched with your clients, not just assisting them with their individual planning, but their business, and their business has employees, which means you could then continue to provide these services to each of their employees. It becomes a much more holistic approach. And let's face it, distribution is kind of a pain. It's an easier way to get clients.
Thanks for sharing that, Heath.
Chris, did you want to say something again?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, you raise your hand again?
Yeah. So Heath, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you can only bill out of the IRA for services provided on the assets in the IRA. So if you were providing financial planning or advice on other accounts, you would have to prorate the amount that you bill out of the IRA on a tax advantage basis for just the assets in that account. Is that correct?
Yeah, what you run into is, technically speaking, if you think of an IRA or a 401k plan as a completely different entity, because they are, then to the extent that the services being provided do not benefit that particular entity, then in essence, you're paying impermissible expenses. It'd be sort of like, stealing from your kid's trust account to pay your car payment. And the government could look at that as a prohibited transaction, or possibly some sort of weird disguised additional contribution or distribution. So you need to be pretty careful of that. I don't know how common it is, but if you have a higher net worth individual and they get subject to an audit, it's something that may be caught and then you got a nightmare. So all the more reason to keep IRA assets and 401k assets separate and billed directly, unless you're working. Like we have a structure in our PEP where that can be done, but it's exclusively for those things that are benefiting the plan, and it's pretty well guardrailed.
Some really good comments here in the chat, and thank you all for your very insightful comments here, Heath especially. So Bill is saying the tax savings, this is a fiduciary comment here, the tax savings by billing out of the IRA is only a big deal because the fees are so high for most AOM advisors. I always remind clients that the savings for my low rate more than negates that. Remember too, that billing from checking accounts and credit cards opens up the opportunity to be able to work with younger and lower net worth clients that don't have meaningful amounts in their investment accounts to bill from. Woo, Stephen Fox, thank you. And Eileen, a fiduciary will always work in the best interest. What are they asking you to do? Each client's different, makes sense to be flexible. Thank you, everybody. Okay, anything more on this point, or can I move on to the next one?
So I'd just like to add here, if I could, that I kind of piggybacking off of Bill's comment here, which is it's really easy to kind of get stuck, at least for me, I think, in a situation where I'm charging the clients the same all the time. By forcing it to be a harder conversation, by doing the harder thing, it provides a checking mechanism to ensure that I'm always adding more value than I'm receiving in payment. And so I just love the perspective of I'm willing to like charge more up front and then having to justify that for the next 6-month agreement that I do, because it forces me to be truly fiduciary. And so while I hear there are some potential tax savings associated with this, if you do manage assets or if you tie it to an AUM model, which I don't do either, I still think that for my clients at the end of the day, it's a better thing for them to have some pain associated with stroking that check, as opposed to me just pulling it out of their account and them not even really noticing it.
You are so pure and honest and inspiring, Kevin Estes. And this is a theme that he says over and over again, that he was on my podcast and he was talking about how he wants to build people less over time. Thank you. This is admirable. I love this. Okay.
Yeah, by the way, I met Kevin here in Orlando, so good to see you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to see you again. But yeah, I definitely feel the same way about him. And it's funny because sometimes I actually kind of feel like a villain, doing advice only. Like I walk into some of these meetings, I'm like, oh God, yeah, these guys are charging AUM. I'm kind of like the villain who's saying like, hey, that's pretty expensive. Like, how do you justify getting a 30% raise last year? But it's something that I think for me, at least when we're talking about billing, there's sticker shock, right? And I like to just kind of get in front of it. I'm like, hey, you're going to feel this psychologically a lot more than you're going to feel the just 1%. But that part of your brain is not the part of your brain that you should be engaging with when you're making buying decisions, right? It's like, so I like to do the math, right? I mean, I just kind of say based on your asset size, here's what it, based on your average life expectancy, here's what it would actually cost you to do that. And what I'm telling people is like, I hope you don't come back to me. So it's kind of I tell them like, this is kind of a bad business model that I've gotten myself into because I want you to not come back, and that's really challenging going back to your earlier point about selling a practice, right? So there is no path to succession planning when you're eating what you kill and you're doing kind of one-time plans and moving on, right? Now there are some clients who will just tell you like, hey, I want to stay on. What does that look like? And but if you're not kind of actively pushing that and being incentivized to keep that client on the hook longer, which I think there is a tremendous amount of benefit to ongoing financial planning, don't get me wrong. But I think that it becomes more challenging to attract, and this is something that I messaged you about, Sarah. It becomes more challenging to attract the best and brightest minds into this space of planning because they're like, hey, look, I know what my value is. I know if I charge AUM, I mean, for me personally, I left a book of business that I built over nearly a decade, and I took a fat pay cut, and I was not working nearly as much as I work now, but it felt better to me, and I think that being in the position where I can financially say, well, I don't really need to win that much, or I don't have a desire to, have a succession plan or something like that. I think that makes it easier for me to get in there and say, yeah, sure, I'll do advice only, right? But I think it's a challenge. I think it's a multifaceted problem.
Well, one day I'm gonna try to come up with a succession plan solution for all of you. Okay, so I don't want everybody to feel like, oh, I have no succession plan. Like I don't know the answer, but one day I will.
I believe in you, Sarah. You got this.
Okay. Yeah, so Stephen Fox says it's amazing how bad people are at translating percentages into dollar amounts when making these decisions, right? Okay, so these are all things that we know, and that's why we're here. Okay, so by the way, there is a lot of like business development free information that's on my website about like there's like a template for flat fee advisor websites. There are lists that you could be on as an advice only planner, flat fee advisor, et cetera. And these lists do get a fair degree of Google traffic. So, you know, there is ways to develop business that, you know, it's definitely an advantage if you're more honest, upfront, straightforward, transparent, et cetera. And if you need marketing resources, I mean, I have free marketing resources. I have a daily newsletter where I publish a tip every single day over email. Let me know if you want to be on that newsletter as well. It's all free. Okay, so wow, that was a lot of time on this one point. I have so many more points, but another thing that we talked about in immersion, and this was over many flat fee advisors were saying this, they were talking about time consuming things that you typically have to charge for outside of a flat fee. So some of the examples given were retitling accounts, anything such as divorce, intense rebalancing for life change, wire transfers, good till cancel orders that are always expiring, et cetera, donating to charities from the actual account at the last minute. So all of these were named as things for flat fee advisors that were kind of listed as challenging, and flat fee advisors in many cases were saying that they were charging hourly, and in some cases they have it written into their contracts that they're able to do this. So that's one heads up I wanted to give to the group. I don't know if anyone has anything else to offer that has been a challenge for you as someone that charges on a flat basis. Scotty, hi Scotty, it's good to see you. Do you have anything? Hold on, Mike, I'll get to you in a minute. Scotty, do you have anything to add to that list?
Oh, but I guess I'm just a little confused by it actually. So unless advisors are managing investment accounts, why would they charge extra for those things that sort of be kind of priced into the flat fee model they're already charging? I mean, if they're managing money, then those should be priced into the way you manage money as part of your hourly fee or your fixed flat fee. But if you have a fixed flat fee and you're doing only planning and you're not managing money, but you're helping them rebalance in that, I don't understand, the retitling process. I mean, you can explain that and provide them instructions, but if you're doing all that extra work, that should already sort of be priced in the model, because people are going to die and go through changes in life and everything else and get divorced. So that's all part of the overall flat fee, unless you want to go to kind of this a la carte type of approach.
You're right. I mean, it is a little bit confusing, right? I mean, and this is where I think it is worthy of thought, on an individual basis. Well, how do I structure my practice? Because if I'm gonna have integrity and go out there and say, this is a flat fee, it's not an AUM fee, it's not scaled, it's a flat fee, right? But if this happens, we charge hourly, like maybe that is a little bit kind of confusing. So I can see your point definitely, Scott, but
unless whoever's doing this, I mean, is going to price it out that way. So like, this is our flat fee. This is what we do for this. And then these are extra fees, and it can be sort of priced flat fee too, because you know what's involved in those things. It doesn't have to be, well, here's our flat fee, and now here's all the stuff we're going to just charge you by the hour. And then, by the way, if we manage money, we might charge you a different way for that too. So it gets very confusing. You're not really flat fee then at that point.
Mike, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, it's just Scott said a lot of, shared a lot of the things that I kind of have in my mind, but I think generally, I think a lot of it's just a personal decision, how you want to structure your business. I've yet to come across any situations where it's been an issue. You kind of know going in. I mean, to me, the advantage and disadvantage of flat pricing as opposed to hourly is, hey, in some cases, you might have to go above sort of what you expect, and that's just sort of built into it. You could certainly say if there's an extreme circumstance, then you could choose whether or not you want to charge some add-on fee or something like that. And of course, the other scenarios, if you have a client that's just going to monopolize your time, they're have an unrealistic expectations, that I think you just kind of handle that in a one-off situation. Tell them, listen, hey, this is the way this is not working. This is what we're going to have to make these changes, or I'm going to have to increase your fee. So I think that's how you handle that. But I think it's, in my experience so far, it's a pretty rare occurrence.
Carol?
I would just say to Scott, especially, we've been doing this for a long time, and again, the firm started out hourly, and then we went to fixed fee back in 2003 or so, maybe 4. But anyway, things do get way out of hand. So we wrote into our contract, that these are the things we cover, and these are the things we deal with on a typical, quarterly basis. But if any one thing turns into a big project, we have the right to call timeout and charge an hourly fee. The fact of the matter is, I'm generous. I don't always know something's growing into a big project. I tend to cover most of it, but there have been times, especially divorce, I can tell you, is one that can get way out of hand and cause a lot of time. I've got a situation right now where we've got trust involved with a child who's getting divorced, and now they want to rework the trust and see if there's a way to protect her in her divorce. And I've had to go up to San Francisco. I mean, this is all day for me, several times. At some point, that's really not factored into the fees. The fees cover holistic planning, but when you get one thing that it can really grow into 40, 50, 60 hours, that's too much, right? So I have to protect myself. So again, it's always a challenge for me sort of to make sure I'm seeing it in advance, and I'm not always, to call timeout and say, let's do this on a project basis. It's happened with insurance, where Chris, as you know, is not in my business directly, but he does insurance, where we've had realization that there's a policy that's out there. We end up talking to gift planning officers to see if they're willing to accept a gift of the policy and what would that mean, and then go back to the CPA and find out what that would mean, and then go back to the insurance company and find the illustration that doesn't exist because the product's so old they don't keep it anymore. I mean, these are the things that I can tell you from experience will really just eat your time. And so we found at some point when we redid our agreements, the attorney helped us write some wording in there that said, if this grows, we will let you know, and we will give you our best estimate of what the hours will be, but we will have to charge hourly. So it's been a real protective point for us.
Yeah, and that's all fair. And I just want to make one quick comment. I don't want to monopolize any time, but I guess my comment on that in any billing model is at the end of the day, when we think of the AUM model, we kind of all know what that is. It's just the question is, what's the percent going to be? But we know how it's being billed, and generally what's involved with that offering for the most part. It's mostly investment management with maybe some planning, maybe a lot depending on the firm. But when we're trying to sort of define what is a flat fee advisor, and you have all these different aspects to it, and they're not really clearly defined, it's based on variables. And I agree with you, 100%, Carol, that, you don't want to be working for free. But at the same time, when somebody comes in, you start a relationship, and if it's not sort of all spelled out and all of it becomes subjective again, then this model as a whole is almost worse than the AUM model, because at least they know what percentage they're paying under that model. So I think that as a group, if we could come up with, more of a standard, what is a flat fee advisor, and how does that, get marketed to the general public, then I think it adds a lot more transparency, hence the name, the transparency movement, to what we're doing. So I agree. It's great you read it in the contract. A lot of advisors do that and have the liberty to change fees, increase fees, and so on. But is there a process and a system for doing that rather than just being subjective about it? I think is at least my 2 cents.
And these are all great points. And I think that it's, it might be a combination of some of all of these things. So it's so wonderful to hear these different perspectives. Now, the next point I wanted to make, and this was something that was a very lively discussion at Immersion 2024, was the idea of succession. As we all know, it can be challenging because, I talked to somebody today who's looking at a $12 million payout for a $400 million AUM firm. And, a flat fee firm, conceivably, what I'm hearing is that the multiples aren't quite at the same scale and the same level, right? And so it can be challenging. How do you find a buyer for your flat fee practice or your hourly practice? Now, a few of the ideas that were being discussed at Immersion were that there was the idea of the death put of from what I understood, and just encourage everybody to chime in here. Having somebody that can step in that runs a practice similarly, maybe in your area. And again, like I have these lists and these directories on my website, just search on like flat fee list or advice only list if you want to find those lists, or I could send them to everybody. But it's a good idea to network. A lot of people come to these meetups and went to immersion for this reason. Finding somebody that could step in, that does things in a similar way, charges a similar way, similar ideology. So the death put was one of them. And there was also an emphasis on like documenting your processes a lot. That would make it easier, or like having, you know, instead of like having the practice have like quirks, so to speak, having a little bit more of a standardized way of operating, such as using industry standard softwares like e-money, etc. What does everybody think about this?
I don't have anything on that necessarily specifically, just to back up real briefly, I just want to touch base on well, maybe it's sort of related, but on the comment around the multiples. I mean, I think it all comes down to revenue, you know, so, and I was just actually listening to Andy's most recent podcast. He's talking about pricing structures, and he makes a specific comment that, you know, hey, his revenue relative to his AUM as you know, assets he manages, you know, compared to other advisors, I think he specifically said it's a joke or laughable or something along those lines. Well, it's just because he charges this fair and reasonable fee. But I think the other thing to keep in mind is that, you know, it's a question, well, would he have the number of clients that he did if he was charging on the traditional AUM model? And perhaps not. So yeah, you might have less revenue per client, and that's done intentionally, but you're probably going to have easier time finding clients. That's been my experience.
Alexander?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point, Mike. And you know, I actually had a conversation with Kitsis about this, and you know, sometimes it's hard to untether kind of how I feel about it emotionally from the data. And it's like AUM is still like 95% plus, right? And people seem to, and sometimes actually I met an advisor who offers both. He says most of the time people take the AUM, right? And so I think maybe we kind of, you know, on that point, maybe we need to look towards some sort of regulatory requirements to make sure that we're not, you know, that we are activating that part of the brain where people are looking at numbers, right? And then if at that point you want to continue, then that's on you. But to your earlier point, Sarah, about, you know, building a business that can actually have resale value, I imagine that it's probably very similar to the way that you would see like an attorney's office working, right? Maybe a transactional attorney's office that's doing estate planning, something like that, where, you know, it's based off of revenue, it's based off of your profit, and also, you know, Sarah, I think you understand this really well, but building a brand is really valuable. Intangible assets can be really valuable, right? So if you're able to kind of get out there, provide value, and the brand is not entirely based off of your face, which in your case, Sarah, it is, but for a lot of people, maybe they're building just a brand that's kind of intended to exist on its own. And I think that has some resale value. And anyways, those are my points. Thanks for the points, Mike.
Bill?
So, yeah, and we're actually in the process of selling now, and it is different with the way that we choose to organize our business. And the first thing that comes to mind if you're thinking of selling an RIA is to jump on all these different services that we keep getting bombarded with information about. RIA Match, and there's just a slew of them. And the thing is, they're pretty useless unless you're doing AUM. They're just totally geared around that. The valuation tools are useless if you're advice only, and even often if you're doing AUM and you're flat fee, because they're going to want to know what percentage you're charging on that. And at that point, the valuation calculator breaks. And so, you know, I'm taking advantage of the free month on RIA Match, but I listed on Biz Buy Sell, which is a platform, probably the biggest one out there for just selling businesses, right? Put the whole RIA thing out of mind. Yes, there's some regulatory and compliance aspects. They're not as complicated as you might think now that I've talked to the regulatory agencies about this, but You're selling a business, and it's really no different than selling a plumbing or legal outfit or whatever. And I found on Biz Buy Sell, the valuation tools were extremely useful because they go right to the heart of the core means of valuing a business for sale. What's your revenue stream? What's your EBITDA? All those important, what is your multiple? Taking you through a quiz to determine, are you putting a fair multiple on this business? And thereby getting to a true value of the type of business that we run and being able to have a better discussion with the folks that are coming in about why we feel it's worth that much and the potential of it. And I thought, well, maybe by doing that, I'm cutting myself out from that big audience of registered people or CFPs or people working at broker dealers that might want to buy a business like mine that are strictly looking on REA Match and platforms like that. But believe me, I got 2 hits from REA Match over the last 2 months. I've gotten probably 2 dozen from Biz Buy Sell, and they're all people working in the business. So they are watching that. And let me tell you, when I explain what's going on here in transparency movement and point them to Sarah, they're just blown away. They're like, I never even dreamed there was anything like this. I love it. Because I feel, one guy told me yesterday, he works at a hedge fund. He says, I just can't keep doing it anymore because I just feel sleazy about working here and doing this to our clients when I turn around and tell my friends and family to invest in index funds, right? So it's been a real eye opener in terms of this whole experience and how to go about selling a specialty type of advice or planning business like ours.
Eileen, I feel like I'm like a college professor, like, or like a teacher, like calling on everybody. I'm sorry.
No, it's a great session. Thanks. I put my hand up just because I've long-term been in the industry. I'm no longer doing this as an advisor, but I started out in the hourly model. Under the succession planning, I've helped others and I've been a party to watching this, but I really just want to encourage this group, look for the second career person, bring in someone to mentor or train, keep an eye on whether or not that person can be introduced to move forward with your clients. And in my opinion, the easiest way to do this is later than you're staying on, you're getting a salary, you're getting a percentage of the revenues. It's all easily disclosed with contracts to the clients. And it's just a seamless way to build your businesses and bring the next generation within, and especially on that second career side. And as I said, I've seen this happen countless times. And later, when I did merge my own practice after 14 years, primarily hourly, I did get at least partial valuation because I was able to show the number of clients that returned year after year after year, along with the ones that brought in new referrals and new business from family members and relatives and things like that. So I'm just encouraging the group. I've been around long enough. This is a saleable action. It's finding the right people to do it with. And I'm very convinced the messaging that's now out there, the interest in these types of business models, Sarah's work and many others, the second career person is looking to come into your businesses and help you continue to have a succession plan. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Eileen, how are you defining second career person?
Even if you went around the room, how many of you started in a different career and later said, I don't want to do this anymore? Look at the hedge fund example. That's still a second career. If that person opened their own RIA and said, I don't want to do what I'm doing as my current employer. So it's people with all different backgrounds that later pursue their CFPs or they get into this business model. But second career is anyone that said, I'm no longer working in my passion. My passion is financial planning and educating and teaching others how to do the index, answer those questions objectively. All of this is the hourly advice only transparency model. That person's looking to join this industry and doesn't know where to go. That's your succession plan. You bring them in, you train them, you pay them, then later you're the one taking a salary as they take over the clients you've introduced them to, and it all works out in the end. I have seen it. It is the way I believe this is going to continue to happen.
Okay, and so I do, like I said, I do get a fair amount of mentoring requests, people that come to this group looking for mentors. I have one right now. So maybe that's one of the venues for this. Do a little more, I think. I mean, I have hundreds and hundreds of people on my newsletter list for this group. And not all of them are advisors that are on this model. Like there's a lot of AUM advisors on that newsletter list. Think about this.
I think Eileen, that was a really good point, and thank you for sharing that. You know, I think it's really valuable to be kind of thinking about that ahead of time. Because if you can get ahead of it, you can help that person, you can train them, you can mentor them. You know, then that allows you to say, okay, later on, you know, I wanna exit, as opposed to, you know what, I've reached my capacity, I'm done now, time to sell, right? So I think that foresight is really important.
I had someone with me who I paid from day one as an intern who had no background in the business whatsoever. And only because later she opted not to want to continue on a succession plan, I did merge my practice after 14 years. She's now a phenomenal planner and always would have been. But again, I can't tell you how many times those opportunities come up. If you're considering succession plan, I really want to encourage everybody to keep that as an option.
One of the last topics I wanted to discuss here before we end the meetup is the idea of the tech stack. So Bill, could you just build a presentation on this in immersion? You could do it way better than me, Bill. Can you just give a few key points about what people thought was the most valuable parts of your presentation about technology?
Sure. So I presented on tech stack and ways to spend less at immersion. And, you know, a few key points I started out with were we're like kids in a candy store, right? If you look at Kitsy's tech map, there's a lot of really cool stuff on there. And like anybody else, yeah, we're into this business and we love seeing all the cool stuff, but it costs money. And we're in business to, you know, try to give our clients the best value and make a profit at the same time, right? And so we have to be careful and remember that, you know, every dollar we spend on this stuff is another dollar that we don't have to put in our own retirement plans and investments and so forth. So it's important to evaluate everything from that perspective. And I think sometimes we get tempted to compensate for imposter syndrome by trying to buy good tech tools to cover up what we perceive as our lack of knowledge, which is typically not the case at all, thereby imposter syndrome. Or maybe we're afraid of, you know, auditing or compliance type issues, and we're spending a lot of money on tools, you know, for that reason. And I showed our typical expenses and people are just shocked. And Sarah, feel free to make that presentation public if you'd like to. Put it out there in the immersion group. But you know, you'd be shocked at how little we spend on the pieces that comprise a typical RIA. For example, we use a planning product that is publicly available. That's part of our business model. We bring in that DIY community. It doesn't want to be tethered to a planner or advisor and have to call and get on their dance card and spend another $1,000 every time they decide maybe we're going to move someplace warmer, so our plan needs to be updated. And so, you know, that's really about $100 a year. And I've used Right Capital, eMoney, and Money Guide Pro, and it's just as good or better. Not as pretty. It is moving off an Excel base now to a web version. I'm going to get the beta today, I was just told. It's going to go out live on the online version next month. But just as an example there. So there goes that big expense every month, right? Produces beautiful graphs and things for the clients that they just love, and a roadmap for the next 5 years and then the rest of their life in terms of, you know, Roth conversions and where they should draw their money from each year to be tax efficient and all that good stuff we get from the pro software. My CRM, it's $300 a year, and it includes everything you would typically bolt on third-party stuff for, like calendaring, scheduling, invoicing, payments, workflows, really sophisticated, logical workflows that automate most of my business. Contracts, digital signatures are all built into this really cheap CRM. It's not a financial advisor specific CRM like Wealthbox or one of those. But it does the job. It's a CRM. What's specific, you know, that really is needed, especially if you're not doing AUM here. And so You know, that's kind of the gist of what I was saying there. Evaluate everything that you're spending. Take your monthly um your monthly statement from QuickBooks or whatever and see where your money's going. Some of it is not really good because you pay annual fees for some of the software, but take a look at it and ask yourself, is there overlap? Am I spending money for this product when something I already have does the same thing just as well and I'm paying double? You know, even something like risk analysis, right? I used to use Riskalyze, which I thought was really cool, right? It used to be cheap. It did one thing really well. It gave me a nice, fun platform to have a game show like meeting with my clients, and we'd gauge their risk tolerance. And then they started building on all this other crap that, you know, every other piece of software does, only they didn't do it as well. And then the charge went way up, and then they locked me in for a year after I had renewed, which started a battle royale with the owner out on Facebook and elsewhere. That finally I got them to let me out of that deal. But it's just an example. So there's a perfectly fine free risk tolerance tool. It's the University of Missouri risk tolerance quiz. Again, it's not as pretty as Riskalyze was, but it's got some fun, entertaining game show type questions that I can go through with my clients. Would you pick door A, B, or C here? And I can get a score at the end that I can put into their profile and satisfy my obligation to make sure I understand their risk tolerance if I should happen to recommend that they invest in a certain way. So that's kind of the gist of what I presented on at Immersion in a quick thumbnail sketch.
Amen. Thank you, Bill. And Skip was saying that after the presentation, he was able to trim several $100s from his budget. So that's what this group is about. It's about sharing information and knowledge to help each other. So amen. Thank you, Bill, so much for your valuable knowledge. Does anyone have anything to add?
Yeah, just that you know, Bill, if you're feeling up for it, I'd love to see that stack that you're working with. If you want to send out an email just so that we can see. I mean, I use XYPN and basically my entire tech stack is covered through that, you know. And actually I would just pay for XYPN just for the compliance. So I'm really happy to get the tech stack out of that.
I'm going to be publishing Bill's presentation in the replay newsletter, which should go out over the next day or so. So I'll send it. I'm going to end the meetup now if nobody has any more questions. So just a few quick things. One of them is that the next meetup is on May 8th, Wednesday, May 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Eric Simonson of Abundo Wealth is going to be presenting on advice only for the masses. And please mark in your calendars March 11th through 13th for Immersion 2025. It will be in Kansas City. And I also sent out a survey earlier about what your overall needs may be in terms of, here, I'm going to put it back into the chat. I'm actually just looking for feedback on this group about ways that it could be strategically modified to yield better benefits to everybody. Should there be an offering that I would need to create for all of you? Is it more opportunities for us to interact either in person or virtually? Any feedback that you have for me? I sent out the survey right now in the chat, and I'm all ears for how I need to make this better for you. Okay, so thank you all for being here. I will see you on May 8th. Bye now.